In 1982, Stephen Callahan became the protagonist of one of the most remarkable open-sea survival stories ever recorded. By challenging the depths of the Atlantic in complete solitude, he ended up fighting a battle not only with the rough sea, but also with the very limits of the human body and mind. Stephen was a naval architect, passionate about boats since childhood. Soon, a solitary crossing of the Atlantic would not scare him. In January of that year, with meticulously orchestrated preparations, he set off from the Canary Islands aboard the Napoleon Solo, a sailboat of only 6.5 meters. The destination was the Caribbean, a journey that promised adventure, but turned into a titanic struggle for life and sanity. At first, the days were peaceful and contemplative. The sails of the Napoleon Solo glided over a calm ocean, and the horizon was an invitation to the unknown. Stephen trusted his vessel and his knowledge, attentive to the slight changes in the wind, to the clouds that drew messages in the sky, to the rhythm of the stars. Each sunset seemed like a reward for the solitary work of an experienced navigator. However, the calm of the Atlantic did not last long. On a certain fateful night, a violent storm quickly formed. The sky darkened and the waves grew with intense fury, tossing the small sailboat like a toy among valleys of raging water. At the height of that night, a deep crash pierced the hull of the Napoleon Solo. Stephen never knew if it was a collision with a sleeping whale, a drifting container, or just a stroke of bad luck. Within minutes, he realized that his boat was doomed. Water was invading every compartment, merciless and cold, turning his vessel into a deadly trap. With time measured in minutes, Stephen acted with the cold blood only the truly determined display. He dragged the orange inflatable boat out, hurriedly inflated it, and with a steady hand, tried to gather everything that could be useful: some cans of food, a homemade fishing kit, wet maps, an improvised harpoon, drinking water, and a survival book. At dawn, the sailboat had disappeared beneath the waves, and Stephen was alone. The Atlantic, vast and indifferent, stretched as far as the eye could see. 1,800 nautical miles separated him from the nearest Caribbean. Thus began his true ordeal. Deprived of a radio, any contact with the world, or hope of immediate rescue, Stephen found himself forced to rely solely on his ingenuity. He eliminated the luxury of waste. Every sip of drinking water was rationed to the limit. Every piece of food, rare and precious, was consumed with reverence, as if they were talismans against death. The cans ran out quickly, forcing him to be creative. Plastic bottles were transformed into rainwater collectors, plastic tarps maintained essential moisture, and the sea, which once suggested an abyss, became a source of food, albeit scarce. Fishing became a survival ritual. For hours, Stephen scanned the crystal-clear waters in search of schools of flying fish or golden fish, curious enough to approach the boat. Each catch was an epic victory. However, for every fish caught, he faced new dangers. Sharks circled his inflatable refuge, attracted by the debris and movements beneath the surface. They came so close that sometimes they almost tore the fragile layer of the vessel with their voracious mouths. If the sea presented constant dangers, it was also inhospitable during the night. The cold cut like a razor, and the heat of the days seemed endless. Small holes constantly appeared in the boat, opened by fish teeth or by accidents. Stephen spent countless hours just repairing leaks, aware that a small mistake could cost him his life. His thin and exhausted body made every task more arduous, and the scale showed a frightening weight loss each week. However, the most severe challenge was perhaps the loneliness. Surrounded by overwhelming silence, Stephen sometimes found himself talking to himself, sometimes delirious, sometimes rationalizing, reinventing time and reason. The starry sky imposed the feeling of a vast and impassive universe, and the contemplation of the ocean sparked deep reflections on life and destiny. He began to see the sea not just as a threat, but as a living, pulsating system, full of small routines and daily miracles. In this forced communion with nature, he developed a strange sense of respect and belonging. Time seemed elastic, days turned into weeks, and hope oscillated between peaks and abysses. On at least 9 occasions, ships or planes passed nearby, enough to rekindle hope, but too far away to notice a small orange boat, lost in the endless blue. Each disappointment was painful, a silent stab that tested the will to keep fighting. But Stephen never allowed himself to give in to despair. He had come too far to give up there. It was only on the 76th day of his odyssey that the unlikely happened. Near the island of Marie-Galante in the Caribbean, a group of fishermen spotted the strange boat with a weak, exhausted man, almost unrecognizable, but still animated by an indomitable spark of life. Stephen had lost a third of his own weight, was malnourished and dehydrated, but had crossed the Atlantic thanks to courage, intelligence, and admirable determination. After his recovery, Stephen Callahan decided to share his experience. He wrote Adrift, a detailed book that became a reference in survival courses, studied by sailors and adventurers around the world. His memoirs even inspired scenes in films, such as in Life of Pi, and still resonate today as valuable lessons about the limits and resilient strength of the human being. The ocean, with all its fury and beauty, taught Callahan that life is, at the same time, fragile and powerful. His story is not just about surviving a disaster, but about rediscovering the value of existence and the infinite capacity for adaptation and overcoming. Stephen Callahan's epic is an eternal reminder that, even when everything seems lost, it is still possible to move forward, guided by hope, ingenuity, and the incredible will to live.